And thanks for staying with us here on Breakfast Central. The United States Congress is considering a bill that could impose sweeping sanctions on 12 northern Nigerian governors, top judges and traditional rulers over alleged complicity in what American lawmakers call a Christian genocide and systemic persecution under Nigeria's sharia and blasphemy laws. The move follows President Donald Trump's designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern, CPC. Trump, in a post on Truth Social, accused Nigerian authorities of allowing the killing of Christians and warned of possible military intervention if the situation persists. The Nigerian Religious Freedom Accountability Act of 2025, sponsored by Senator Ted Cruz, mandates sanctions under the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. Now, those found culpable would face visa bans, asset freezes, and not forgetting to financial restrictions. But let's tell you some more.
Meanwhile, the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, held an emergency meeting with service chiefs and security heads in the nation's capital, Abuja, yesterday. Security sources say the meeting focused on assessing the security and diplomatic implications of Trump's remarks and preparing a unified national response, according to reports. The NSA urged all agencies to strengthen intelligence coordination and reinforce Nigeria's sovereignty. Join us this morning on Breakfast Central to discuss this is international lawyer and foreign policy lawyer Dignity Ekop. We're also joined by Mr. George Ashiru, Chairman, African Democratic Congress in Lagos State. So one welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us on Breakfast Central.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with Mr. Ekop in the studio with us. There's a United Nations Charter, and we're governed by international law. They call it a rule-based order. Does the United States have a right to interfere in the internal affairs of Nigeria and also threaten invasion? Is that under the ambit of international law? A good place to start with.
Okay, to be clear, under the UN Charter, the United States cannot interfere in Nigeria's domestic issue because of the principle of sovereignty and non-interference. So that would be a violation of the UN Charter. Yeah.
Is there an exception to that? Is there a point where it's allowed for them to come into Nigeria?
The concept of sovereignty under international law is not absolute, but there are conditions that have to be met before you can have a derogation from sovereignty. For instance, to be able to intervene militarily in the domestic affairs of another state, you have to have the authorization of the United Nations Security Council, number one. Number two is that there's also been this notion under international law that where there is mass atrocity crimes, grievous and serious breach of human rights, there can be intervention on humanitarian grounds.
Like what we witnessed in Rwanda in 1994.
Exactly.
Yes.
So again, that's the grounds on which the U.S. is making whatever demands, I would assume, because they are claiming that what is happening, and that's not a claim because there have been Christians that have been killed,
exactly.
But that there's been a large number of Christians, but the U.S. is now anchoring in on that to say that they want to come into Nigeria. So from what you're saying, does the numbers, the statistics that we have, or the killings, do they amount or do they qualify for an opportunity or an avenue for the U.S. to come into Nigeria?
So by the assessment, under international law, state parties have a responsibility to protect its citizens against genocide, to protect its citizens. And of course, sovereignty has two concepts. There is the internal sovereignty and external sovereignty. Internal sovereignty is that a state and a country has every right to protect its borders, to exercise control over its population. External sovereignty, a state has every right to conduct foreign policy with another state to be able to protect its interests. However, to the question that you asked, there has been reports an allegation of serious human rights abuse, on which President Trump is anchoring his message that he's going to send military action. Without meeting certain conditions under international law, that will not be legal. One of those conditions is that if you look at the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Courts, a state must either be unwilling or has refused to deal with this sort of serious crimes. Where a state fails or is manifestly unwilling, then the international community can act.
You said when the state fails.
Or is unwilling.
So with what we have now, can that be categorized as a success, a failure, or the government being unwilling?
So the challenge that I have is that it doesn't seem to me, I may be wrong, but it doesn't seem to me that the Nigerian state is really serious and is following its own responsibility under international law to protect its citizens. This is not even a debate about who is being killed or the religion of who is getting killed. It's about that the state has that responsibility.
Okay, we've talked about the legal angle. Let's bring in Mr. Ashiru to talk about the political aspect to this conversation. You've heard this. Even yesterday on the show, we had the former DSS chief who said that he believes that the Nigerian state lacks the political will, and this is me paraphrasing, but the political will. And he gave a number of explanations of things that show that the Nigerian state lacks political will. He talked about the negotiation with terrorists, in some parts, the radicalization of terrorists, and the fact that if the government really wanted to be able to fight terrorism in Nigeria, that the government will have been able to deal with it by now. So let's get your thoughts. Is that a position you agree with, or do you think that, just like Mr. Temitope Ajayi also said earlier, that the government has been doing its, trying its best?
Thank you very, very much. This is critical topic at this critical juncture. In our national development, 65 years of existence as a combined, unified country, but not yet a nation. And the evidence of it thereof is what the whole world is referring to, right from the days of Bring Back Our Girls Brigade and so on and so forth, and the sense that the Nigerian government has never shown any passion to protect the rights and privileges of the people under the UN Declaration of Human Rights. There seems to be a sense that we have a right to protect we have the power, and therefore we use it to protect the rights of those who support us, who vote for us, who look like us, who speak like us. And that's what the international community is viewing, as we can see. Now, that doesn't mean that if Nigeria was not invaded, in the early days of Boko Haram, Nigeria was not invaded even when the girls were abducted over time, there will be no invasion. But I think what's important is that there's a searchlight. There's a light that is being shone on Nigeria now that is holding the government accountable for the fact that people don't have the freedom to gather, they don't have the freedom to speak, they don't have the freedom to practice their religion, they don't have the freedom to stay where they want to be within the ambits of the law because they are Nigerian passport holders or qualified to be passport holders. All of these are the kinds of things that go up to the United Nations and the ambassadors see, and they take back to their presidents. And when their presidents get to see it, some presidents will look and say, the only way I can make your government take action is to beaming a searchlight on it and making an international noise about it. So that will force you to reflect and say, are we doing enough to ensure we're protecting the rights of people to freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and so on and so forth? And you see, when the government is picked at, it's because when the people don't have the capacity to fight the government, either through the vote system, through the ability to even freely discuss, their opinions as guaranteed by this same United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and the international community is going to try and come in. And this is therefore a responsibility of government to say, okay, we are doing our best. We can show you evidence that we're doing our best. But even what we in Party ADC were experiencing in Lagos is an indication. If little things like people attacking a group of negotiators sitting to meet, and the government has nothing to say about it, and the government is not doing anything about it, how much more potential genocide in the north of Nigeria?
Okay. Well, you've talked about that. What's your take? Let me come back to you before we come back to the studio. There were statements made by the SA to the president that the president was going to jet out ASAP to meet with President Trump so they can speak about the issues. bedeviling Nigeria in terms of insecurity. Later on, there was also a counter statement also put out by another essay. Coincidentally, he was here with us live yesterday, stating that there's no such thing that the president will be jetting out to meet with President Donald Trump. Rather, they would be meeting somewhere in South Africa, of course, where
G20.
the G20, where they could look forward to talk about that. What do you make of the communication, the body language that's coming from the presidency since this entire issue came to the fore?
Well, some of us see it as false flag communication, intentionally misleading the public by sitting and making statements that gives the impression that action is being taken. The fact of the matter is, when the president of the United States speaks, and you don't have a full Nigerian ambassador in the most powerful country in the world, that we are already sending a message to America. We are not ready to be diplomatic in our approach to the relationship between our countries. Our bilateral relationship has been reduced to the president of Nigeria, the president of America, and not being able to receive an ambassador, a full ambassador from the largest country in Africa. So that already is a misnomer. Then we have the challenge, another important challenge, being that what America is referring to is asking you to take action. They're not asking you to come and negotiate with us, come and discuss with us, come and tell us, all manners of God knows what in explanation. These are evidences based on facts that have been forwarded to them. And these facts have been consistent. It's not new to us in Nigeria. We've been seeing and hearing it for decades. And so what they're simply saying is take action. Take action. That's all I hear Donald Trump say. Take action. And he's going to add a little bit of this threat factor, that if you don't take action, I will take action. Of course, we can look at the law and say the law doesn't permit it. But we have seen violations of the law internationally in other nations. So we don't want to wait until it happens and then we start quoting the law. United Nations, as we are seeing it right now, doesn't have the power to prevent the largest nations in this world from doing whatever they want to do, quite frankly. So we don't need political actions and statements. What we need is boots on the ground in the Northeast, in the Northwest, in Kwara, in Kogi, in Ondo, in all those other places that have been attacked, and in Lagos to prevent even road transport workers from attacking the citizens of Nigeria who are sitting in Lagos meeting. And sometimes protected by the same police who should be protecting all of us equally. This is really the message the president needs to act on, not just giving us this posturing that gives the impression everything is all right. Everything is not all right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ashiru. I'd like to come to Mr. Ekop in the studio. From a legal standpoint, Mr. George Ashiru has told us what we need to do politically as a country. And he's also told us the reality of the world we live in. The United Nations is not, you can quote all sorts of international laws and charter, and the big players would always get away with what they will. We've seen how Israel has conducted itself in the last few months, the United States of America, and it seems we live in an era of, might is right. Having listened to what Mr. George Ashiru said about, keeping our house in order, how, if you could advise the Nigerian government, what should be their priority now, and what can they do to prevent, because people say, it's not going to happen, it's very easy to dismiss it, but it's a possibility. He tweeted it, and he was in his full consciousness when he did that. So what can we do to prevent such from happening? Because international law, I don't think, can save us if he does decide to do it.
I think the president would have to be very honest in terms of the actions that the president would have to take. We are not seeing those actions very clearly. And the issue that triggered all of this is allegations of genocide. If you look at the constitutive elements that make genocide, looking at the Convention on the Prevention, yes, what's popularly known as the Genocide Convention, on Article 2, it defines what genocide is. Violence against people based on nationality, based on race, based on religion or ethnicity.
And from what we've witnessed in Nigeria, would you categorize it?
Especially in the Middle Belt, it would appear because the threshold under the Geneva Convention, you don't have to wipe out an entire people. Once there is intent.
Yes, intent from where? Is it state-sponsored?
Intent from terrorists, because the government uses the word terrorist. So even if we are borrowing their words, I think there has been manifest intent that they seek to destroy either in whole or in part a particular set of people based on either the people's religion or ethnicity, and that qualifies as genocide under the Genocide Convention and even under Article 6 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. So if the government, the state itself, fails or refuses, like I highlighted before, it leaves room for external influences. It leaves room for the international community to look at options that they can use to be able to ensure that this sort of crimes don't occur. And if you look at the legislation that has been introduced in the US Congress, this is part of targeted diplomatic efforts to use diplomatic leverage to be able to ensure that the government acts. And it's a shame on ourselves that we have to have the US taking certain level of action, introducing legislations before our government would seek or even attempt to take certain actions to prevent the commission of genocide. This ought not to happen because the first responsibility of government has to be the protection of lives and property, not just under international law, but even under domestic law. Our Constitution provides that it is the responsibility, in fact, the first duty of the government, protect lives, protect properties. I think the government so far hasn't done a good job in that regard.
Right. I mean, you've now then explained what the definition is of genocide is legally, the reality of Nigerians, and how that, from your perspective regarding the laws, matches what some would consider genocide. Now that we've gotten to this place where the United States, and I think I'll go to Mr. Ashiru, where the United States has declared Nigeria a country of particular concern, what would you say the implications are for Nigeria as a country? What would you say the implications are for us economically, politically, and even as we're counting down to the elections? Before now, majority of our conversations were more political. It felt like we're already preparing for 2027. However, how do you think that all of these conversations will play out in the coming months for us as a nation?
Well, when United States of America or any of the larger nations starts to speak in a derogatory manner about your nation and its governance and its laws, what it does is it sends a larger message to other countries. It sends a message to investors. It sends a message to those who are buying stocks and shares, who want to come into the country, who perhaps even belong to a certain religion and they want to settle in the country, and they start hearing this, then it will have an impact on the level of investment in the country, the level of faith in the governance of the country, and the idea that perhaps the country is not hunky-dory as may have been sold by Foreign Affairs Ministry to the various nations. So we really don't ever want to be in a place like that. Economically, that will be regarded as reducing the rating, the economic rating of the country from AAA to AA to 1A to B and down to God knows what. So we don't need that to happen. We don't need the kind of searchlight that comes to our country that forces other nations and other investors and even settlers and those who want to migrate positively to begin to see this country as a country where there is some kind of dichotomy in terms of the way we apply law, and that there are people that can't be allowed to settle in certain areas of the country. So we don't want that. And also it then creates a situation where government is not going to have to move its resources from what were their priority areas now back to security areas, which they should have done in the very beginning. So perhaps, they were thinking, let us just put all the money we have in building a coastal road, whatever it's called there, Lagos, Calabar. Let us put all our money in building these big infrastructures that we can then name after the president. Let us then build all of these wonderful legacy projects. But now, there's this noise about security. We then have to move more money and more resources and more people to certain areas of this country, which then changes the balance in which government or governance is being meted out to us, because money is moved from one area to the other. That may mean more taxes, that may mean more borrowing, that may mean that more posturing within, and that could also mean that the National Security Advisor now has new powers, can say, oh, you know, we are trying to prevent terrorism, we are trying to prevent this, and they can just go and start picking people up. All of these have implications. So anyone who thinks they are just statements don't understand international law, international governance, or international politics. So this is important for us to take note of. And Nigerians should look at the body language and the actions of government, hold them to account to do the right thing as well.
I mean, just to follow up to what you said regarding the reactions and implication of what the statements are. The Business Day and a number of other newspapers have reported that Lake Chad has shut border with Nigeria over U.S. military threat invasion, and that, you know, from the details of the report, we can see that the Chadian army has been placed on full alert with heavily armed troops and armored vehicles deployed along key transit corridors connecting the two countries. You know, what does this mean? How do you expect that other countries will react as a result of this?
Just think about it. The fact that Chad, a tiny nation that basically feeds on Nigeria, can even respond to the international diplomatic threat. So what they are responding to is the idea that terrorists are Nigerians and are in Nigeria, and that they will cross the border in order to run away from a potential Trump United States military action. So that's an implication to us. It complicates matters because it's telling us that the idea that government is saying that terrorists operating in Nigeria are from the Sahel region, they are not Nigerians. They come in through the borders and then they do this and then they do that. So this is an indication that Chad is taking more serious, it's taking it more seriously and showing the rest of the world that it doesn't believe that the terrorists are coming through the nations, through Niger, through all these other countries, that they are actually Nigerians in Nigeria doing what is happening in Nigeria under the watch of the Nigerian government, of the DSS, and all these other military intelligence, and so on and so forth. And now Chad and probably other nations are indirectly putting the searchlight again on Nigerians, on Nigerian security forces. And what they're going to do over the next few weeks and months is going to tell us whether or not truly they are homegrown terrorists or they are foreign terrorists, as the Nigerian government always likes to allege.
Okay. I want us to look at one key aspect in this conversation as we're set to wind down. Let me come back to the studio. Let's look at the fact that the laws, a few governors, as mentioned here, 12, it mentions 12, they will be unveiled shortly from the United States. We're expecting assets to be frozen. We expect a lot of actions to be taken up against them. What does the law in this instance say about Nigeria not having ambassadors, envoy to represent us, to stand as a diplomatic front, to speak with the United States in issues like this? And for the fact that we don't have ambassadors.
I mean, 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. And we don't even have ambassadors in America. Do you think it any way has an impact on how America is acting towards Nigeria and how we should also respond? I mean, if you were called right now by the president, sorry, I have to put you on the spot, and you were to use your understanding of the laws and how to handle this situation, especially looking at the fact that we need ambassadors, envoys to represent us, how do you think the president can go about this?
Well, to start with, the very failure of Nigeria failing to have an ambassador, not even to the US, but to a lot of other countries, is a reflection of our policy making. You know, our foreign policy failures are just a reflection of our domestic policy failures. Take, for instance, when Donald Trump issued that tweet, you would expect that the government will immediately try to engage, try to do serious diplomacy, but the government has been paying more attention to, you know, with respect, propaganda, deflecting the issues, denying the issue. So then, what then is the option for the government? There has to be engagement. We should have an ambassador to the United States. We should be able to do that. It's sad that that has not happened till now. Very sad. Okay,
Mr. Ashiru, what do you make of that as well? No ambassadors. We do hear the latest story that the presidency is working hard to ensure that they conclude appointments of ambassadors. This is going to 2 years plus after.
So ambassadors will be appointed. Ambassadors will have to go to the National Assembly just a few months before political parties are meant to conduct their primaries. We're very unserious in this country. We're very unserious in this country. We are already entering political season. Elections are going to start from next year in terms of the congresses and the primaries of all of the 19 parties in this country. Any choice you make at that time, any decision you make at that time is extremely and purely political. It is not even going to be for Nigeria's benefit diplomatically or economically. So I think it's already showcases that 2.5 years into this government, they haven't understood the priority of creating positive, powerful relations, especially with the countries that invest the most in your own economy. So this is not the way to govern Nigeria, and I think we need to change that.
Now, finally, for my and Mr. Ashiru, just before we wrap up this conversation, I mean, some will say the silver lining in all of this, regardless of how, shameful it might be that another country has to lecture us on how to go about business, is that, it could spur action and make the military authorities score decisive points against terrorists. But having said that, looking at where this is emanating from, and there's also the political angle of this, that President Trump is facing domestic issues at home, and this convenient distraction from him and away from the genocide in Gaza, and also the hypocrisy of the Magnitsky law and the Leahy laws. Because look at Sudan, for example, El Fasher, we saw what happened last week. We watched live stream genocide in the last 2 years happening in Gaza, actively supported and diplomatic cover by the same United States of America. And people are wondering, you're doing all of these things, you're bombing. In the last 3 weeks, the United States has extrajudicially killed over 61 people off the coast of Venezuela, saying, they were trafficking drugs. You're doing all of this. You don't have a right to lecture a sovereign nation on how to go about their business, and also threaten violence. There's also the threat to Nigeria's corporate existence, because some of these lobbies that have been used to push for this legislation are now calling for the balkanization of Nigeria openly. As a serious government, how do we damage control and make sure it doesn't go beyond this? Because we know how fragile things can get in this country, and also restore some sort of dignity. I mean, the language of the President of the United States was not diplomatic at all. They now disgraced Nigeria and things like that. How do we restore our dignity as a nation and prevent things from further breaking down?
Thank you very much. We've always known the way and manner in which the President of the United States speaks and acts, nationally and internationally. That in itself does not bother me. That's who he is. That's what Americans voted for, and we believe in it. His posture and his behaviors around the world, America has been known to be a country that only fights for its own interests. There's never been a time that America has been known as a country that fights for interests of other people without taking into consideration how it impacts their own national lives. That has always been America. We've always known this. The question really is, if we had had a relationship with the American government, they would have been speaking to us about their concerns, and it would never have come out to the open. That's what we need to think about. If we had had a good relationship with the American government, then whatever issues they have with the way we're running this country, there would have been a diplomatic relationship that would not have created an opportunity for this to happen. I can tell you that about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, that the foreign affairs minister of this country was my own late uncle, Ambassador Buda, Ashiru, and that I have videos and pictures of him talking to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and then the gentleman that followed after. So what it means is that there was somebody speaking directly to the US government. So these kind of things don't come out. So us bothering to say, oh, US government is doing this in Darfur, it's nothing to do with, we're talking about Nigeria and what is happening in Nigeria. So we are clearly forgetting what I said earlier. A lot of these larger nations don't follow international law. So everything you've said to me now is confirmation that United States of American government will do what they feel they need to do to protect their own citizens, even if they violate international laws. The question for our own Nigerian government is, do you do what you need to do to protect Nigerian citizens? When Nigerian citizens were being murdered in Southern Africa during the period of xenophobia, how much did the Nigerian government do about it? When Nigerian citizens, even in Libya right now, and in other nations, they have been maltreated, what has Nigerian government ever done about it? How much more how Nigerians are treated within Nigeria? So I think, generally speaking, I would rather focus on whether a government is serious and what our government needs to do to change it, rather than to focus on what other governments are doing or what they're not doing in the international stage. We need to step up, fix our country, so that we do not have this embarrassment of other people putting eyes on our behavior within our own nation.
All right, my next question is also to you, Mr. Ashiru, and then I'll come back to the studio to our guests in-house. The Presidency Nigeria's page on X has started to release important information to show how we're a very religious, tolerant country. And in these tweets they had put out, they said, over 99% of Nigerians identify with a religion, one of the most faithful nations on earth. Then they go ahead to give stats. They say for 2024, religious composition of Nigeria, 227 million citizens. Then they break it down by faith groups, share population, and approximate population. So they say Muslims comprise 50 to 51%, Christians comprise 47 to 48%, traditional and other faiths comprise 2 to 3%, and unaffiliated and non 1%. That was for 2024. And then they go ahead to make projections for 2050, where they say will be 300 million citizens. They say Muslims will be 51%, Christians will be 47%, and others will be 2%. What is the relevance right now of this information that they're sharing online? And how important is it that they're doing what they're doing?
The government of Nigeria is unserious. The government of Nigeria needs to understand that terrorists want to make 47%, 20%. That is their own agenda. So it's not even talking about the fact that people are having children in Christian families, people are having children in Muslim families. Look at my name. My name is George Ashiru. Ashiru is a Muslim name. George is a Christian name. So therefore, that tells you the kind of family I come from. So that is not even the kind of thing that I want to hear right now. There is tolerance in my family. There's tolerance in a lot of families in the Southwest. But there are people living in Plateau, in Benue, in the North Central areas that are facing existential threats as we speak. So those statistics don't help them. It doesn't help the fact that every day they get attacked. People call them headsmen. They call them this, they call them that. That is what we're saying, put attention on. Don't look for excuses. Don't gerrymander and start going around and doing all of this statistic. It's not what we're talking about. What we want to hear is that Nigerian government has released a company of soldiers. It has released, a battalion from this barracks and that barracks to go and protect this community and protect that community. That's the action we are looking for, not X. The people in Plateau who are living inside the jungle, who are running away from terrorists, they don't have access to X. They don't have access to all of these various things that the government is using to do international propaganda. Take the life of your people seriously, your own people, people that voted for you. Take the life seriously. That's what we're saying. This is not politics. This is serious. This is human nature. This is human beings we're talking about. Every single Nigerian that dies because the terrorists kill them, whether the terrorist is homegrown or international terrorists, they are a reflection of the lack of protection of the government that they voted into power. That is what I'm going to say to the government of Nigeria. We don't need statistics. The only statistics we want to hear is that there's movement of troops away from political enemies, away from your rivals, direct to the enemies of this country. That is the only action that you can take that make Nigerians feel this government is serious about protecting our lives and our properties.
I completely agree with you in the sense that what we want to see is an end to insecurity. Let's come back to Mr. Ekop here in the studio. Just flowing from the question that we've just asked him, it feels that many would say that since this whole new information came to light about President Trump threatening to invade Nigeria, that the government has spent a lot more time convincing the U.S. that there isn't any form of Christian genocide in Nigeria than it has in fighting insecurity. That's what it looks like, and it feels like there's been more conversation, which is what has maybe led to the army's pressure. The pressure has been, the pressure to show working that has now, many have said, is recycled video that the army is putting up. But in terms of international negotiations or international conversations, what would be the likely next steps? He's talked about how the government needs to release armed forces, military men to go and secure Nigeria. But what would be, in terms of international diplomacy, what are the next steps that you think that should ensue?
I think generally that this is also a failure of Nigeria not having what we call a grand strategy in its foreign policy operation. Earlier in the year, I read a news article that Nigeria has been admitted to the BRICS economic bloc as a partner state. And within that same period, I noticed that President Trump had been tweeting, or rather writing on his own Truth Social, attacking the BRICS economic bloc. it seems to baffle me that people that think of our own foreign policy, people that, I read statements put out by our Minister of Foreign Affairs or by the Minister of Foreign Affairs himself. He appears to be overwhelmed. Sometimes they appear not to really have enough facts, enough research to be able to know how Nigeria should posture on some of these issues. I was taught that Africa will remain the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. I don't know when that changed. That I'm not against Nigeria, swaying to the BRICS that is being controlled by Russia and China. I'm not proposing that Nigeria has to swing to the other way and be pro-West. But what I'm saying is that we must have our grand strategy for our own enlightened self-interest. For instance, now we don't have ambassador to the US. So who is negotiating for us? Who is speaking to the Secretary of State?
Perhaps they charge their fares.
Maybe
there's only
the envoys too,
little that charges their
Well, we
fares.
have Iraq in international diplomacy, and this reflects how serious countries are going to take you based on what they see you do.
But the Foreign Affairs Minister, was planning, and an entourage were planning to go to America when this whole issue started. But permit me to just ask my final question, because like I say, we're out of time. Mr. Ashiru, my question is, you as an opposition, what is the role of the opposition now that you do have this U.S. invasion threat coming to Nigeria? Is the opposition going to stand neglecting or forgetting any political ideology, whether it's APC, whether it's PDP, whether it's DBD, whatever it is? Are we going to see the political party, your party, and every other party stand as one to speak in one voice, regardless of whoever sucks is God or walks is God, and talk about how deep you want to protect our own territory and integrity as a country? Or will the opposition speak against the current APC? What's your stand?
Our party has released a statement via the National Publicist Secretary, Malam Bolaji Abdullahi, clearly stated that we do not support any form of invasion or any interrogation into the sovereignty of Nigeria. We do not. We cannot support it from anybody, from any nation. So we are not happy with the threat that our country will be invaded or bombed for any reason. Yes, support the country to be able to protect and defend itself is very useful. We have seen the American government provide the same support to other nations of interest to them. So because we obviously do not have a kind of relationship that will make them have confidence in giving us weapons and technology and support and intelligence that will help us to defend ourselves from both internal and external threats, then that itself is where the government is weak. And we keep saying it, and we have been saying it long before this particular government took power, that there's a weakness of the way that we play politics in Nigeria, of not taking the interests of people first. So we are all Nigerians, and we would never say because, it is so-and-so person in government, so-and-so power in government, all of a sudden we are going to invite a foreign entity to interfere in our internal affairs. No, but we do appreciate the fact that a searchlight is beamed on our issues that have international implications. Within this country, we have the International Organization for Migration, a UN agency, of which I am an ambassador of that agency. And the statistics they give us about the Nigerians and how Nigerians are maltreated and mistreated abroad, and the level of migration that Nigerians are experiencing. And when they migrate, what do you think they tell people in other countries when they look for asylum? They will tell you first that they are subjects, or they were maltreated, or that there was an attempt to wipe them out through genocidal claims. This is the information that is passed to the United Nations through these migrants, illegal migrants and legal migrants, in order to be able to get asylum abroad. So this is where the attention then comes from. That's why the international statistics come from. And some of them will tell you that so-and-so was killed in their family, and they were killed even by Nigerian forces. So we need to get our acts together. So the fact that we are saying that we're not blaming just a particular party. We are blaming anybody who is in government, who has been in government, in particular over the past 20, 30 years. A lot needs to be done to secure this country so that we don't have any form of threats from international agencies or nations or presidents or rulers or dictators or whoever they may be from different nations regarding the territorial integrity of our country. So ADC stands for Nigeria and with Nigerians. And we will stand, if the government does what is right in this matter, we will stand with them. But anywhere that they fail to do what is necessary, we will also point it out.
All right. Thank you so much for your time with us, Mr. George Ashiru, African Democratic Congress, Lagos State Chairman. And also thank you so much for being here, international law and foreign policy lawyer, Mr. Dignity Ekop, for speaking with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.